The problem with having a villain in a tale of history is that you elevate this person beyond what they are into this kind of figure of mustache twirling evil, a person who can do And speaking of tech bros and making the world look like it works, the most stupid discourse I could have ever imagined came up on Twitter again. I gotta get off Twitter. I need to take the Brooks and Sunday route and dive out. Tucker Carlson did an interview with a weirdo. That's all Tucker Carlson's interviews, to be perfectly frank. Who said that Winston Churchill was the villain of World War II. Now, Winston Churchill was not a good man. He was kind of a little bit of a shit. And Hitler is not a good man. He was a kind of a very big shit. But this sparked a series of discussions, two kind of parallel ones. The first was people trying to justify this position that Winston Churchill caused World War II by not appeasing Germany properly in the 30s, which is a buck wild position on several levels. First of all, Winston Churchill was not prime minister in the 30s. Winston Churchill was a very unpopular backbenching MP. Second of all, it's fairly well known that Chamberlain, who was the prime minister in the late 30s, took extreme steps to appease Hitler, such as the Munich Agreement. So, the provocative actions of the United States that were directed towards the Germans in the early portion of the war. Like someone brought up Destroyers for Bases, which was a program in which the United States took custody of a number of British territorial bases in exchange for a series of old aging destroyers to escort convoys across the Atlantic. Was when the war had already started. So I'm not sure where they were getting that from. But the more disturbing element of this was these people who were trying to argue that Churchill was the good guy and Hitler was the bad guy, and perhaps even more disturbing, other people arguing the converse, that Hitler was a good guy and Churchill was a bad guy. And I want to talk a little bit about why it's not useful to think about history in the terms of good and bad guys. The concept of a good guy or a hero and conversely a villain are artifacts of stories, legends, and myths. They're elements of these things. They are central to that idea of telling a myth. And if you turn around and you've watched my show with Zanzi, we talk a little bit about myth making versus history. Myths are semi-foundational to countries. They aren't history, though. The problem with having a villain in a tale of history is that you elevate this person beyond what they are into this kind of figure of mustache twirling evil, a person who can do wrong not because they are making a choice and evaluating a position and choosing to harm others, but they are wrong because they cannot be anything but wrong. They cannot be anything but evil. So, you'll hear people like Vosh misuse this term a lot, ontological evil. And ontology refers to a branch of philosophy called metaphysics, in which we talk about the way the thing must be. It has to be this way and no other way. It's generally used as a format for very early argument for the existence of God, or a theological argument for the existence of God. Imagine a being of perfection uh, that is the ultimate good, the greatest possible being. And what would make this being more good is if this being was real. And that's kind of like a very bastardized version of the ontological argument for the existence of God. But it's kind of the misuse of the term is problematic. I hate it. I'll yell at people who misuse ontological or use it in a sentence without referring to theology, because it doesn't fit. People aren't metaphysically anything. They are, first of all, very physical and very real. And second of all, their natures are not determinate. They cannot be the thing simply because they must be no other thing. So, and Hannah Arendt talks about this, the banality of evil, when she's talking about Eichmann's trial, is he is a person. He has hopes, fears, dreams. He is real. Yes, the perfect island argument. He's real. He's not larger than his argument. So the problem is people choose to do these things. Hitler chose to direct people to enact the final solution. They chose to invade Poland. They chose to murder Poles. They chose to do these things. And every layer down the way, different people had to make choices. They didn't do those things because they could do no other thing. They did those things because they chose to. And it's important that we remember that. It's important that we remember that they chose to do it because it tells us that we could do it too if the circumstances are just right. The line between being a good person and a bad person is not some metaphysical realm out there. The line is a choice that you make in the moment. You choose to help another person. You choose to harm another person. It is a way of taking away agency from the people of the past by trying to ascribe to them being good, bad, evil, or wrong or right. No, wrong or right's different. I misspoke. They are people who chose to do a thing, and we should understand those choices. We should understand those choices so that we know not to make them. And conversely, we should understand people not in the framework of being heroes because they are elevated above the events of the time. We should understand that as a choice they make. That a person chooses to run into a burning building and save people. They weren't metaphysically destined to do it. We have a certain level of control. And I think that's vital to understanding history. Because as much as you might never be one step away from being the banal evil person, you're also just a step in the opposite direction away from being a heroic person. And if we lose sight of that, we, particularly those of us who are leftists, lose. Because I'll be honest with you, I look around and the field's getting a little sparse. There ain't a lot of us that are, waving the flag the way they're supposed to these days. And it's going to get harder and harder to convince people that these are ideas worth pursuing, worth doing, and that they matter. And I'll be honest, if we start from a place that creates irredeemable monsters that are evil, that can be nothing else but evil, then we run the risk of deciding that we can't convince people to begin with. That we can't convince people that you can make the things around you better. That you just sit there and stew and say that the world is going to close in around you until the capitalist grind consumes you. And conversely, if we imagine some people as just good, then it's hard to criticize them in an honest fashion. and that kind of leads to the creation of those Tylers and the unexamined people who wear who wear the skin of leftism instead of embodying it. Also, I have been advised, and I'm supposed to tell people to hydrate more. So hydrate, drink water. And there is kind of, I think, the a weakness that we have to kind of address. I see a lot of people choose the way they interact with others designed to keep themselves safe, and I can understand that in a real world setting where you evaluate a person and say, person is X. I'm going to choose not to be around them. Online is different. Um, we have a genuine chance here to talk to people, and if we start from the ontological evil standpoint, then there's no point in even trying to change minds, or ontologically good for that matter. These things are what they are, and they will run their course, and that's not an effective way to advocate for anyone. So like, have a good one, Vic. The the concept is I want to get at with all this, these two segments, I think, is believe in other people. Take your licks when you can, and when it turns out to be wrong, but don't lose that belief in other people because it's going to matter for us.